Thank you,
Freaking
honey.
sick of Americans. They get everywhere.
Hey, Kylie, take your time, will you? What's Ouija's?
No, that was... Oh. Right, okay, folks. Today we're going to be looking at the Battle of Mons Grapius, or Mons Grapius. And the one thing about Mons Grapius is it's associated with a very important individual in the history of Britain, in the sense, Roman sense. It's a chap by the name of Gnaeus Agricola, and there's a battle or there's an event associated with him. Now, one thing that we do know about Agricola is that lots of really interesting things, and I've given a whole class on this. It's believed that Agricola may have actually invaded Ireland as well. So all of Agricola's activities were between AD 79 and AD 84, at which moment Agricola was withdrawn from Britain, and we don't know what happened to him. So we've been looking at military campaigns, and we've been looking at we've looked at the Boudiccan campaign. We've looked at Varus's and Arminius' campaign with Teutoburg Forest. We've looked at Spartacus, and this is in that list. And there's some nice chunky little bits of information. And what we do see is a backdrop of the Romans going into Scotland, conquering the tribes of Scotland, and then almost giving up and going home. Now, I can remember doing a class on this years ago. And the class that we gave years ago was discussing whether Mons Grapius was a successful campaign in the eyes of the Romans. If it was a successful campaign in the eyes of the Romans, why was this great military leader withdrawn? Was it a defeat for the Romans that they had to pull out of Scotland for a few generations? What's going on? And I think what's going on needs to be in your own minds with some facts that we're going to actually give you today. So the field of Mons Grapius, it's a rich, cultivated field at its present day and age, surrounded by the Grampians. So there we go, the Grampians. Now, Mons Grapius could have actually occurred anywhere in Scotland, from Inverness all the way down to the likes of modern day Edinburgh, for example, in this entire area. So a landscape of 150 miles south to north, the Battle of Mons Grapius could have actually taken place from east to west, an area of about 100 miles. So one of the things that we're very much intrigued with is archaeological evidence for these battles. Now, yes, we've seen it, haven't we? And I think Jessica did Vercingetorix with you. And when you looked at Vercingetorix, it was like there's a massive siege at a fort and we can't find it. Where's the archaeological evidence? We're not sure. Right, okay. Lots of people lost their lives. Where are they? Okay. The Battle of Watling Street associated with Boudica. Where's the archaeological evidence? So you could be excused for thinking that at this time, this is the usual excuse. If there's a great battle, afterwards, somebody spends the next few years gathering all the bodkins for the spears off the field. They collected all the shield bosses up, all the bits of chainmail, everything was collected, all the bones were collected, put in a nice hole somewhere, job done, Bob's your uncle, right? That's not what happened. Because if you think about the Battle of Watling Street associated with the Boudiccan revolt, the Battle of Watling Street may be actually under modern day Manchester, for example. So we've got no chance of finding it. But surely there must be some archaeological evidence somewhere. And then when we look at any of the battles associated with Julius Caesar, we just can't find evidence for them. Hang on a minute, does this mean that they... No. When we look at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, between Varus and Arminius, what we do find is that there's archaeological evidence by the bucket load. You go through the Teutoburg forest, there's Roman bodies, there's German bodies, there's bits of armor, there's gold coins, there's all the evidence of a battle there, right? So back to Mons Grapius. Surely there must be archaeological evidence out there. So this is where we're going to go. So it's a bit vague, very vague. So you're thinking somewhere up there. Okay, there you go. Somewhere where this brown line is, yeah. Somewhere along this line was the Battle of Mons Grapius. What was it? Let's just give you a few nice facts. What's going on here? Let's have some nice facts, and then we're going to have actually a battle plan. Amazingly enough, that's going to be interesting, isn't it? We're going to actually have a proper battle plan. So here we go, but we're not doing that yet. So Battle of Mons Grapius, the Battle of the Grampian Mountains. According to Tacitus, was a Roman military victory in what is now Scotland, taking place 83 AD. Oh, actually, maybe 84 AD, maybe a bit before 82. Here we go. We're not really sure when it actually took place. Did it take place on the 14th of August at 12:15? We don't know. So this is a matter for debate. Historians have long questioned some details of Tacitus's account of the fight. So when we look at the fight, the battle itself, it's based on Tacitus's account. So we've got we've got lots of little look at that. Yeah, lovely, loving it. We've got these little facts and figures, battle plans. There you go, job done. That's nice. It's all good, right? That's all based on Tacitus's accounts, right? And all these figures are based on Tacitus's accounts, right? So, what battle there? Facts and figures. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I've got those facts and figures that you've got in front of you. Nice, love it, lovely. And I'll just call out to Michelle. Michelle, the bottles of milk are outside, and a naked statue of Diana Dawes is also standing at the doorstep. So what we're going to do. Details about the Battle of Mons Grapius. So it was between the Roman Empire and the Caledonian Confederacy. No, not the American Civil War, the Caledonian Confederacy. Now, the word confederacy is a really interesting word because it means a unity of different tribes. It was used in the American Civil War as a term for the unified confederacy of the states that wanted to break away from the damnable Union. So the Caledonian Confederacy is a load of tribes gathered together, people gathered together. Rather interesting. And it was led by an individual known as KARL-JAMES. Now, most of what I'm talking about actually comes from the man himself, the Tacitus. What Tacitus tells us about KARL-JAMES? KARL-JAMES, basically, the name KARL-JAMES is the man who possesses a blade. Yeah, so what we need, guys, girls, we need to tell us about KARL-JAMES, right? As we did with Arminius and Varus. We don't know what he looked like. We've got no idea really, but this might give you a little bit of an idea. So the only historical source that features KARL-JAMES in history, written down. Yeah, okay. It was written down by Tacitus Agricola. So obviously you can get an idea that Tacitus is very close to the event. So Tacitus Agricola. In other words, that's his work. His work is vitae about Agricola's life and times and everything that happened. Agricola's vitae, Agricola's life, written by Tacitus. So the most distinguished for birth and valor among the chieftains, wrote Tacitus. So he was distinguished. He was the man who was leading. Tacitus wrote a speech which he attributed to KARL-JAMES, saying that KARL-JAMES gave it in advance of the Battle of Mons Grapius. The speech describes the exploitation of Britain by Rome and rouses his troops to fight. So, in other words, Bill, I know we've seen Braveheart, and Braveheart is a brilliant film, but that speech that was given by Robert the Bruce in Braveheart, it was probably not the speech that was ever given, because it's written by a historian who just wanted to embellish it. Now, Tacitus, that's Braveheart's, right? The Battle of Culloden, 1314. Let's go back to 83, 84 AD. So Tacitus tells us of a speech, but most historians note that since Galgacus was fighting Tacitus's father-in-law, Gnaeus Julius Agricola, in this battle, the reader should assume bias. So even the words that were said to be attributed to Galgacus may have a sense of bias. So here we go. Galgacus as he talks. And we'll do it all in Gallic, so you know what I'm talking about. Whenever I consider the origin of this war and the necessities of our position, I have a sure confidence that this day and the union of yours will be the beginning of freedom to the whole of Britain. To all of us, slavery is a thing unknown. There are no lands beyond us, and even the sea is not safe, menaced as we are by a Roman fleet. And thus in war and in battle, in which the brave find glory, even the coward will find safety. Former contests in which, with varying fortune, the Romans were resisted, still left in us a last hope of victory, in as so much as being the most renowned nation of Britain, dwelling in the very heart of the country and out of sight of the shores of the conquered, we could keep even our eyes unpolluted by the contagion of slavery. To us who dwell in the uttermost confines of the earth and of freedom, this remote sanctuary of Britain's glory has up to this time been a defence. Now, however, the furthest limits of Britain are thrown open, and the unknown always passes for the marvellous. But there are no tribes beyond us, nothing indeed but waves and rocks, and the yet more terrible Romans, from whose oppression escape in vainly sought by obedience and submission. Robbers of the world, having by their universal plunder exhausted the land, they rifle the deep. If the enemy be rich, they are rapturous. If he be poor, they lust for dominion over us. Neither the east nor the west has been able to satisfy them. Alone among men, they covet with equal eagerness poverty and riches. To poverty, slaughter, plunder, they give the lying name of empire. They make a solitude and call it peace. We will defend. And that's the speech of Tacitus. No, that's the speech of Galgacus, written by Tacitus. And you know what? Wasn't some of that used in Lord of the Rings? Wasn't some of that speech used in Braveheart? Hasn't that speech been used by Owen Glyndŵr? In other words, I love that speech, but it's and eventually what would happen is Galgacus is not mentioned during or after the battle, and he is not named as one of the hostages Agricola took with him after putting the Caledonians to flight. Both Galgacus and this speech may be figments of Tacitus's invention and imagination, but bloody hell is good, isn't it? They make a desert and call it peace. Oh, you can't, that you can imagine any Hollywood actor giving that speech. And by the way, Michelle and I at the National Museum of Wales today, there's a Richard Burton exhibition, and I would advise you go and see it, all of you. Go and see the Richard Burton exhibition at the National Museum of Wales now. It's fairly quiet at the National Museum of Wales now.
Carl, I don't think it's open until October, the exhibition, to the general public.
Oh, it's open now. We just went around it.
Is it?
Yeah, Bill, it closes on the 3rd of October. So you've got the October bit right. It closes on the 3rd, yeah.
Okay.
Apparently, you've got a book to go into the museum, but you don't need to book and see the exhibition because the exhibition's free. Okay. Yeah, you've got to book a space. So the museum's free, but you've got to book a space.
Okay.
So Bill, get there. You are a fan of Richard Burton, and it's well worth it. This is the type of speech Richard Burton would have given.
Indeed.
I am from Wales. Whenever I consider the origin of this war and the necessities of our position. Sorry.
Elizabeth and I, we love too much.
We love too much. Do you know what? I'm sure Lloyd George must have copied some of this as well. Apparently, Lloyd, I've been listening to this thing. We've come completely off the Romans now. But Lloyd George gave speeches like this. And Lloyd George was one of the best. Actually, I'm related to Lloyd George. Lloyd George is the greatest orator in history. Probably because he stole this speech. But this is written by Tacitus. Now that's the only depiction, right? That's the only evidence we've got of KARL-JAMES ever existing, right? Ever. That's all we've got, right? So what we need to do, I need to tell you a little bit more, a little bit more about this. So what we're thinking, right? Listen to these figures, right? Now you've been looking at that chart in front of you, right? Now, the figures in front of me tell me, and they're slightly different. We'll just do the blasé thing. The battle took place, and there were between 15 and 30,000 Caledonians, and they suffered 10,000 dead. So if it's 15,000, that's basically 2/3 of their army are dead, right? Now, that's what the Romans tell us. And the Romans had between 17,000 and 30,000, and they had 360 dead. Very interesting figures, that. So in other words, the Romans had the same numbers as the Caledonians, which is not really a competition, because usually you've got to outnumber the Romans. So the facts in front of us are Julius Agricola, governor of Britain, to inflict a strategic defeat upon the Caledonians as a precursor to enduring occupation of the Grampians. So in other words, what we're talking about, Agricola had to defeat the Caledonians for the Romans to occupy Scotland fully. Something else happened. So look at this here. Now the figures are different from the figures I've given. Up to 19,000 Roman legionaries, right? Which is quite a considerable force. That's 2 Roman legions for a start, right? Supported by auxiliaries. So it's saying that he had the 20 Valia Vitrix Legion. Well, 8,000 legionaries is more than 1 legion. So anyway, we've got that up to 20,000 men versus the Caledonians need to overwhelm the Romans. The Caledonians need to defeat a Roman field army, basically as Arminius had done, right? So what we're saying in that speech is Tacitus is sort of pointing to the past that the Romans had been defeated. Now, I'm going to say that KARL-JAMES didn't have chariots because they would have been absolutely pointless, right? Center infantry, on the flanks cavalry. Well, I don't think they would have had they probably had the same amount of cavalry as the Romans. 3,000 is a lot of cavalry anyway. We've seen 3,000 horses and what muck they make. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give you some nice gen, right? So we know about Tacitus, we know about the story, and what we're talking about. It was the end of a campaign. It was the end of the campaign. It was the unconquered British tribe. You know, this was the one to defeat. This was going to be the end. How many times have we heard that? This is going to be the end of all wars. It was the beginning of something else. So after many years of avoiding the fight, the Caledonians were forced to join battle when the Romans marched on their main storage granaries in the Caledonian landscape, just as they had been filled from the harvest. So in other words, the Caledonians had no choice but to fight or starve over the next winter. So in other words, where they were storing their grain at hill forts that were vulnerable, and if they lost those hill forts due to the Roman onslaught, they'd have nothing to feed their families over the winter months. So this is all really, really important stuff. So if you want to compare what's going on in this, if you want to if you want to really get an idea, it would be the equivalent of the Battle of Isandlwana, where you've got 20,000 British, all with rifles, facing 20,000 Zulu. The Zulus would not have prevailed. They would have been wiped out before they even reached the lines. The difference is, the Battle of Isandlwana, the Zulu outnumbered the British over 10-1. But with this, there's something really interesting going on. The same analogy is not exactly the same, because the Romans didn't have rifles. They didn't have artillery. And what type of artillery that they could have put in the field would have been quite cumbersome. So the Caledonian tribesmen would have been armed with spears and swords and some shields, swords and spears. The Romans would have been armed with the same. They would have had a slight advantage, but the Caledonians would have had an advantage of knowing about the high ground. Now, what we do have is some idea of depictions. In my notes here, it's talking about Caledonian chariots. Right, I'm struggling with that, right? I am really struggling with the idea of Caledonian chariots. And the reason why, it's an upland area, right? And the fields would not have been like this. And even if the fields had been like this, how are you supposed to plow a chariot through something like this? Have you ever tried to plow a car through a field like this? You're not going to get far. So I'm really worried about this idea of having chariots involved in the battles. But Tacitus tells us that they're the chariots, so I'm going to go with that little bit for now. So what we're talking about is that over 10,000 Caledonian tribesmen lost their lives to 360 auxiliary troops. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison there. The Battle of Watling Street, Boudicca. When Boudicca faced off the army, when Boudicca tried to face off the armies of Suetonius Paulinus in 61 AD, it was reported that around 300 Roman troops were killed to 10 to 20,000 that were with Boudicca's army. The similarities are uncanny. It's almost as if somebody plucks a figure out the air. It's like doing a yearly tax return and picking a figure out the air. That would be a very stupid thing to do. And just saying, all right, what we're going to do, we're going to say, right, okay, there were like 40,000 Romans and 100,000 Caledonians, and what we had was 20,000 Caledonians dead, and we had 5 Romans dead, right? So, you know, it's a really awkward thing, right? So what the interesting thing is that the Caledonians, the ones that lost their lives in the battle, retreated into the woods, and the Romans were unable to pursue them. Now, that's really interesting. So that's sort of giving you an idea. We've given you basically a bit of an overview, right? The Romans were unable to find the rest of the Caledonian army that survived the battle in 83 or 84 AD. So that means that the bulk of the Caledonian army survived. Actually, the strange thing is, this is another fact that people don't know. After the Battle of Culloden in 1746, most of the Jacobite army survived, but they chose not to go on with the war. Okay, the difference is where the Jacobite army did not continue to fight further, right? The Caledonians were left to fight another day, and they kept with them all their ability to feed themselves over the winter months. So Tacitus says this is a decisive victory, but some people say Tacitus is a liar. Some say that the battle never ever took place. Now, remember, he's directly related to Gnaeus Julius Agricola. He's related to Gnaeus Julius Agricola because Tacitus is his father-in-law. Right? Now, it's some say. Now this is really damning, isn't it? Right? Some say that the Battle of Mons Grapius never ever took place. The Agricola never ever found the Caledonian army, and that makes sense that he never found the Caledonian army because they were bringing in their harvest. Now, one thing I realised when I was in West Wales on the weekend, I looked around and I thought there's trees, there's land, and I thought if this was heavily wooded, you could lose a whole army in this wood and never find it, right? How were the Normans able to defeat the tribes of our land in the first place? You know, all those questions bring to mind. Interesting enough, the army of Agricola was soon handed over to another known as Sallustius Lucilius. And Sallustius Lucilius replaced Agricola. It is likely that Rome intended to continue the conflict, but the military requirements elsewhere than the empire necessitated a troop withdrawal, and the opportunity was lost. Tacitus' statement or his account in his history of the Roman world between Nero and the 68 and 98 AD, he describes Britain was completely conquered and immediately let go, denotes his bitter disapproval of Domitian's failure to unite the whole island under Roman rule after Agricola's successful campaign. So Tacitus is saying, look, there was a successful campaign, right? But did this actually all happen? No. Is everything that we're told actually all happen? So I'm telling you 1 minute that the battle took place and the next minute it didn't. What are you to believe? As Bill is there to remind me every single week, archaeologists lie and lie again. But the fact of the matter is, something like this is to open your eyes. And the reason why we're coming back to this, right, is that the people who wrote the history were the Romans. Was the battle which involved Vercingetorix, did that actually take place? We haven't found the archaeological evidence for the battle between Vercingetorix and Julius Caesar in 54 BC. Did it actually take place? That's a really interesting question. Right. Did the Battle of Watling Street, the battle between Boudicca and Romans, actually take place? Because we haven't found the archaeological data. Question marks. Your minds are brimming with wanting answers. Considerable debate and analysis has been conducted regarding the battle location. People wandering up and down Scotland. A number of authors have reckoned that the battle to have occurred in the Grampian Month, within sight of the North Sea. So, in other words, that would make sense because that would mean, if we have a look at the map itself, let's go have a look at the map and we go back. So what we're talking about is that it was within sight, somewhere here, right up here, and that's a likely location because you could get the navy into the coast. You could evacuate troops if you needed to. That's a really interesting thing, right? So the other thing to say is that did it actually take place further on towards Aberdeen? But we haven't yielded any archaeological evidence relating to this battle. There must be some archaeological evidence. There'd be a load of bodies at least, right? But we don't really know. So, but what I'm going to do, I am now, right, going to look at a little bit of an idea of how the battle may have actually taken place, right? Now, this is where we're going to go next, right? So we're going to do the battle anyway. It's taking place somewhere like this, right? There you go. Military movements. The ones in red are in fact is the Roman army. So the little blocks are actually cavalry. And the big blue stuff is actually the infantry. And there's more infantry at the rear. And this might indicate the chariots. So let's give us a nice little bit of information. This is something that Tacitus mentioned. Basically the words of Agricola, not KARL-JAMES. There are no people beyond us, nothing but tides and rocks. With these words, Tacitus summoned up the palpable excitement and sense of achievement that must have been felt across the ranks of the Roman army as they prepared for the Battle of Mons Grapius in AD 83 autumn, or the early months of 84 AD. After 40 years of fighting, Britannia would finally be subdued. Rather interesting stuff, that, isn't it? So, there's been all this fighting, campaign after campaign. The Romans have been fighting in Britain since AD 43. Without a let-up, it has been almost constant, right? The Roman army either needs to withdraw from Britain or it needs to conquer the rest of Britain. So this is considerable. Now, what you can see is some nice dates on that little map there, and not that little map. Let's look at the other one. Okay, where are we? What you can see is that Agricola has secured all this area by about AD 81, AD 82. So there they've got all that secured. Even some of the islands are secured, right? That's what we're talking about. So the next step is, as we go into my notes, the next step is to conquer the rest of Scotland. Prelude. So what we're talking about is that the name for the location is the Benanch. It's like they believe what it is. It's like a little sub valley, and in the back of the valley is some trees. And it's said that that's where KARL-JAMES gathered his army. Such a mobilization would not have escaped the notice of Agricola, and he moved to intercept. Approaching the location known as Benach, which is near the north coast, as we've already said, the Romans established a substantial marching camp near a place called Durno, protected by the river Uri. Now, we've mentioned the numbers. We've mentioned what we're up against. Now, this is rather interesting again. What we're talking about is that Tacitus' narrative refers to the Britons as Caledonians. Like the Roman writers, like later writers, not the Romans, but they, start again. Like later writers and the Romans, we talk about the Silures being a united confederate tribe, but nobody would have called themselves the Silures, and nobody would have called themselves the Caledonians. The vast number he was able to muster meant support from other tribes must have been significant, and it is likely that many sent warriors to fight the Romans. There's the tribe known as the Venaconi, the Coronavi, the Lugi, and the Smyrte tribe. The Dumnoni of Stirlingshire, not the Dumnoni of Cornwall. The Cronoes, the Canonicai, and the Carini tribe, and the Vacomagi, and the Taxicali tribe. All of these tribes were a group of people that were able to be called the Caledonians by the Romans. Roman forces had been depleted due to the requirement to augment military operations against other tribes. Thank you for the tea, Michelle. Certainly, a detachment of the 9th Hispanic Legion was on the Rhine. However, the Roman battle group remained a significant size, with the legionary forces at least matched in numbers by auxiliary regiments. So in other words, for this campaign to succeed, Agricola needed to send most of the Roman military into Scotland to defeat whoever these people were at the legendary place of Mons Grapius. The battle. We're going to go on to stage one. Stage one. Okay, let me get my notes up. Let's see what we're doing. Hang on a minute. Okay, stage one. Right. Deployment. Let's show you the map. Deployment. So what we're looking at a map, right? Now, this is rather interesting. And the reason why this is rather interesting is what that shows is that on the right-hand side there is actually a Roman fort. So they were directly attacked by these Caledonians, more or less where their fort was, their marching camp. The Caledonians deployed on the lower slopes of Banach, with their front ranks on the plain and those behind on the higher ground, basically backed by the woodland. So what you can clearly see is the woodland at the bottom part of the screen, and you've got the Caledonians in the sort of blue. This would have given...
Carl, we're not seeing images like that. That's all we've seen all the time is the map, just the map.
All right, Bill, I'm glad you told me. Okay, let's just sort of change. Thank you, Bill. Do you know, I gave a whole lecture. I told you about that lecture. You know, I gave a whole lecture that I thought the slides were changing and it never did. Right, so what we are seeing now is... What are you seeing now?
Yeah, we've seen a map of a battle campaign where all the forces are lined up against each other.
Here we go. Speed this up, Bill.
Yeah, there we are.
Right, that's it. Did you enjoy that lecture? Right, okay. So basically, what there is, we've got the marching camp in marked in the right, and they just basically deploy against these Caledonians. Now, the Caledonians do have the support of the wood behind them, the forest behind them. They do have the support of hilly terrain behind them. But what they've done, they've deployed on their bulk of the armies deployed on the low ground. And if there were chariots, the low ground could actually take advantage of the chariots could take advantage of the low ground. And obviously the cavalry can come down from the upland. So this is what we're talking about. Yeah. So if we're talking about organization, so obviously there is our cavalry on both sides. You've got the infantry. Usually, well, it really depends how the best way you want to do this. You're going to put your auxiliaries in the front, and to bring your legionaries up in the reserve. It's exactly what Napoleon did at Waterloo 2 hours too late. He sent his Imperial Guard in because the infantry had failed to break through the lines of Wellington at Waterloo. If he'd sent them in 2 hours earlier on, we'd all be speaking French. And eating snails. I don't want to eat snails. I don't want to. So there you go. This is the deployment that we're talking about. So again, I'm going to rub that off there. That's just sort of clear. So they deployed from the camp. The Romans have deployed from the camp. The Caledonians have deployed on the opposite side. And basically, the chariots are there to intimidate the Romans. It would have been left with no doubt as to the task, the scale of the task. In front of the Caledonian infantries, again, were the chariots, manned by the tribal nobles and the most accomplished warriors. After addressing his men in another great speech, you can imagine the two of them, can't you? This is my speech, mate. You've done yours. Hang on, it's fine. Now they would have done that in the 7 Years' War in the 1700s, but obviously not then. They would have probably booed it, wouldn't they? So basically, what needed to happen is Agricola needed to set his men across the river, and then they would have had no choice. As soon as they're engaging the enemy, they had nowhere to retreat. Tacitus suggests it was honourable not to spill Roman blood, but there is no evidence of such a policy elsewhere. Hang on, what Tacitus suggests it was honourable not to spill Roman blood, but there is... Right, okay, yeah. So obviously it's the idea that, let's not spill the blood of Romans, but you've got to. It seems more likely that Agricola used... basically, Agricola had seen these techniques used by the native Britons before. So he knew how to deal with them. It was typical tactics. The chariots would probably be unlikely to be used in battle, right? But nevertheless, they were intimidating his soldiers. So upon approaching the Caledonian line, Agricola ordered his auxiliary regiments to increase their pacing. So in other words, to scare the enemy. So you're gonna march. You're gonna put your enemy in there and march them in. Keep marching them in. Get them in there, just to sort of intimidate the enemy. Let's just we as Romans are gonna kick ass, right? Tacitus suggests his reasoning was to prevent his line being enveloped by simultaneous attacks. So in other words, he needs to get in there first. He needs to kick the enemy first. Superficialist makes sense, but if that was the general's real concern about being overrun by the enemy, it would surely have been proven to bring forward the legionaries. That's what I was saying. You send in your auxiliaries first, then the legionaries. And the problem is with chariots is that they're going to make mincemeat of men who are compacted together. Again, what's going on here? The Roman cavalry would predominantly draw from auxiliary regiments, and the cavalry would likely fight the other cavalry on the opposite side, and that's what would happen. So what we're talking about, so we've done the first maneuvers for a start. Okay, the Romans have been deployed, and let's move on. Let's get the images in there. So here we go. The Romans have now deployed across the river. So the whole point is to try, and now the enemy's intimidating you with their triangular. With the enemy is in fact got the chariots there lined up, so they're meant to intimidate. But at the same time, the Romans are going to push forward. They're going to tell their men, don't be scared by what's going on. You know, we need to have a victory now. This is going to change history. This is going to be the way things are actually going to go on. So what happens next? So clearly what happens is that when the Romans are actually attacking, right, they manage to get the enemy in, hopefully get the enemy to panic, right? And what does make the enemy panic is that they use a strategy that the Caledonians are not used to. You chuck in the cavalry against the cavalry, right? So that's what the Romans did. They put the cavalry in against the cavalry. That's the way to do it. In history, you always have cavalry on cavalry. Your cavalry make sure that the enemy cavalries are occupied in the field of battle. So what you're going to do, this is the next troop deployment. This is the next troop deployment. Fighting starts. So in other words, you do this. The Roman cavalry predominantly seems to win the field, sending hopefully the army of KARL-JAMES into complete panic. However, again, this is all from the likes of Tacitus. What is happening next is that and also the other thing as well is with the native British cavalry off the field, the Roman cavalry is off the field as well. So it's now Manolo upon Manolo. It's just man against man. It's likely that the cavalry is going to be occupied chasing the native peoples for quite some time. Right, so the next one. So little is recorded of how the Roman forces defeat the Caledonian chariots. I'm saying that I don't think chariots were there, but if they did, how did the Romans defeat them? The expanded frontage would have allowed the auxiliaries to adopt the standard military tactic of breaking formation in front of a chariot to allow it to penetrate the ranks, where each could be surrounded and neutralized. So the idea is, right, you've got a chariot coming towards you. As soon as it's slowly coming towards you, you get out the way. The chariot hits your lines behind. The man behind sorts out the chariot. But I just drifted off then, didn't I? Right. Yeah. So basically the Caledonian tribesmen with their chariots, the Romans need to defeat them. So how they did that, we don't know. I'm repeating myself. And what happens next is that if the chariots were involved, what happened to the evidence? Where are they buried? And the other thing that we do see about the chariots is that chariots from the time of Julius Caesar are seen to be obsolete in battle. They're seen to be they're not to be used in battle. So again, back to the chariots. If they were used, how did the Romans neutralize them? So the idea is that in front of a chariot, the Roman army would break formation. The chariot would keep going, would hit the ranks behind, and then the ranks behind would surround the charioteers and neutralize them. This is how you would defeat a chariot. But we don't really know if that happened. We don't really know. The stratagem had been devised centuries before. For the Britons, chariots were used as an early form of dragoon fighter. The dragoon would go in, break the lines, and then the warriors would come in. Is that what happened? We don't know. The chariot driver would approach the enemy, and it's said that what might happen, this is another way of looking at it. What you might do is you might send the horses in with the chariot behind into the Roman ranks. You would then disembark as the chariot's flowing into the Roman ranks. As the Roman ranks are trying to deal with the chariot, surround the chariot, you're in there attacking the Roman ranks. But there's one problem with that. The numerical superiority that the Romans have got. Where you've got a small number of charioteers who have leaped off the chariot, they're going to quickly be surrounded. And unless you've got infantry behind you straight away, right? The infantry behind you. So what we're talking about, let's do a little bit of a plan to sort of understand this a little bit better, right? So what you've got, if you see this representing a chariot, right? That goes into, say, breaks up the first Roman line, right? Then the chariot itself hits. The Roman line is surrounded. If then men leap off the chariot, right, they are then themselves left exposed, because all the Roman army has to do is surround these men whilst they're surrounding the chariot, right? Then the Romans have also closed ranks. So the native Britons can't actually get any more men in to help the charioteers. So in other words, this way of fighting is not really going to work. So that means overnight, all these chariots here have been neutralized. So the only thing the Romans need to do now is to defeat the auxiliaries behind. That's what the Romans need to do. They need to defeat the auxiliaries behind. That's the next thing to do. So let's change. That's next image. Next. There you go. So what's happened now is that really all you've got is cavalry against, infantry against infantry. The auxiliaries against the Caledonians. What's happened to the cavalry at this stage? We know what's happened to the charioteers. This is what's happening next. This is the next slide on the screen. So little is recorded of how the Roman forces defeated the infantry. Again, the Roman forces headed by the auxiliaries now advanced upon the massed Caledonian infantry. So in other words, what's happening now is the Romans are now infantry against infantry, men against men, shields against shields, swords against swords, the pilum against the spear. Now, what may have happened is that because we're in close quarters now, any pilums would have already been thrown into a way a pilum works, right? We've mentioned what a pilum is before. Let's just sort of, a pilum itself is a long shaft, right? And with a thin, hang on, let's just do, let's try and get something a bit more thinner here. It all seems to be rather thick. Right, hang on a minute. Let's sort of put a little arrow in there. Hang on a minute. No. Right, okay, let's draw a nice old pilum, right? Let's just get a really nice... So a pilum is a thick shaft, right, like this. And what it is, you've got a thinner piece of metal, and then you've got a bodkin, right, on the top. When this hits a shield, what happens is that the this very hang on, it's very thin piece of metal here, right, and we'll draw that in. Hang on a minute. I need to get this very thin piece of metal here bends. So as this is embedded into the shield, this piece of metal bends. So that means a heavy piece of shaft weighs the shield down. So the shield's got to be abandoned, right? Meaning that the Caledonian tribesman is exposed. However, did that actually happen? That might be what actually happened, right? So statistically, the Romans have now got an advantage. The Caledonians have been heavily defeated. Their cavalry has moved off the field. Their chariots have been neutralized. So the Romans would have started to gain ground, hacking their way onto the lower slopes of what's known as the area of Bernache. Okay, this is the area of Bernache. This is the area we're talking about where we think the battle actually took place. It's possible KARL-JAMES was killed in this part of the fighting, which makes sense. Or does it? Because we don't know anything more about KARL-JAMES in the rest of history. Now, what happens is something rather interesting. Another scenario. Look at that. Now, this is rather interesting. Right, this is again assumed from the writings of Tacitus himself. What's happened is that given the relative size of the two forces, a large proportion of the Caledonians had not yet engaged in the battle and had climbed to watch events from the summits of the Bernache. These troops now descended the hill and attempted to outflank the Roman lines. In response, Agricola deployed his 4 regiments of auxiliary cavalry, which he had kept in reserve. These experienced soldiers quickly routed the Caledonian reinforcements. So in other words, what we're talking about, this was a feint. This was meant to draw off some of the infantry from the main fight. So the Caledonians wanted to draw off some of the infantry, the Roman infantry, from the main fight, giving the infantry of the Caledonians some respite. So in other words, what we're talking about is that these guys here were meant to surround the Romans towards the rear. But before they could do that, they were hit by Roman cavalry. The whole point would have been able to relieve the pressure that the Caledonians here had in the battle, and that would have meant that the Caledonians could have won the day. But it didn't happen that way. So the experience of the Romans warded out at the end. So then it's likely as well, the last image that we've got today is that we've got the cavalry, the Roman cavalry is then engaged into the ranks of the Caledonians. And that means that the Caledonians are able then nicely to escape into the woods, and the Romans are not able to pursue. So that's very interesting. And there's something very interesting about this whole story. Now, what is interesting, the Romans would have used their cavalry ruthlessly to pursue the Caledonians into the woods, but they would have been unable to do that. Most of the Caledonians were able to escape. Now, this is rather interesting. Anyone that knows anything about the Battle of Watling Street will know, one, that the Romans to defeat Boudicca managed to get themselves into a cleft within what's seemingly a valley. And guess what KARL-JAMES did? He did that. Suetonius Paulinus at the Battle of Watling Street also insisted that there was woodland behind him so he could retreat his army into the woods. That was Suetonius Paulinus in 61 AD. Guess what KARL-JAMES did? He used Suetonius Paulinus' strategy, and he gathered a woodland or a forest behind him. The whole point is that it's seemingly that the Britons are actually learning from Roman strategy. This time, the Romans made more use of their cavalry than they had done at the Battle of Watling Street over 20 years earlier. So finally, what we're going to do is look at some of the outcomes, and we're going to call it a day. And I got to be honest with you, if you realise I had a weird, funny turn earlier on, I got to look back at the footage. Did anyone actually see that? No, I actually had a weird, funny turn. I was I remember I had a weird, funny turn. I was talking about my the word charioteer turned into something else, and I thought, shit, what am I talking about? And then I don't know what happened there. Anyway, so the outcome of the battle, well, as long as you guys didn't see it, that's good. So the aftermath, the battle was an overwhelming tactical victory for the Romans. Tacitus tells us. We're talking about numbers. Roman dead were so few, but I think that that's unlikely. I think that's unlikely because the charioteers, in having chariots on the battlefield, would have killed a number of Romans anyway. Just having a chariot on the back, just having a horse coming towards you, right, with you know, a heavy chariot, that would have killed a few individuals. And if you've got enough chariots, you know, you've got a few hundred Roman dead alone, right? The Galgacus's cavalry just wouldn't have stood on the field and just taken it. They would have fought back. The Caledonian infantry would have fought back, right? So something must have gone wrong because Agricola was withdrawn. This is the thing. This is what's said. Given the lateness of the season, Agricola had little choice but to withdraw his forces to their winter quarters, which meant the bulk of the battle group leaving the operating area. Certainly, the 20th Valevitrix, the Valevitrix Legion, which had fought in many a campaign, presumed to be the backbone of the legionary forces in Britain, had moved back to Carlisle beyond Hadrian's Wall, or Stane Street as it was before Hadrian got to Britain. Agricola did however, send the Classis Britannica, the British Roman Navy, to logistically support any field army that was left in the field. So it was important that this battle took place near the coast. This undoubtedly ensured the message of the Caledonian defeat was carried far and wide. So in other words, what the Romans did, they sent the navy up and down the coastline, up through to Caithness, Orkney and Shetland, to sort of, you know, look what we've done. It was not, apparently if you've got a great victory like this, you're supposed to do something with it. It's a bit like the Romans having a victory at Stalingrad and then heading back to Germany, you know, or the Battle of Kursk. If the Romans had won Kursk, they thought, oh, that's nice, we defeated the Russians, yeah, let's go home, right? That wouldn't have happened, right? So there's something quite strange. Agricola was withdrawn. Now, it's likely that the Romans didn't defeat the large force of Caledonians. If they had, Agricola would have never have been withdrawn, maybe. The Romans started constructing a large military area, and the spine of this new frontier was a new Roman road that ran from Camelon on the Clyde Forth to Doune, southeast towards Aberdeenshire, passing by the new legionary fortress at Inchuthill, intended to become the base of the 20th Valevitrix Legion, which had actually moved down to Carlisle. So what's going on there? Let's take a look at that little bit of a plan there, right? So what's weird, right? You've got the Battle of Mons Grapius. Right, so if you've got the Battle of Mons Grapius, here we go. We're nearly at the end, by the way. So what we've got Mons Grapius up here, but the Romans retreat down to down here. It's not even on the plan. They retreat all the way down to Carlisle, and then they build a frontier that's all the way along here. They built a frontier. That's the new frontier. So what if the Romans had defeated these people, right? Why are they having to build a frontier there? Remember, they've just defeated these tribes. Why are they retreated? Why are they retreated? Right, I mentioned the Roman fort at Inchuthill, and the Roman fort at Inchuthill, if I can, is by there. There's Inchuthill, and that was supposed to be the base of the 20th Valevitrix, but they didn't. They retreated down here. So there's something not quite right here. And you can see that. History is something not quite right. There's something queer about the history. Right? So along that road that I've described, they constructed watchtowers, fortlets, day-to-day policing along that road. They were worried about something. It was known as a Gasque Ridge frontier, the Roman frontier that very few people talk about. Despite the flurry of military activity following Mons Grapius, Roman occupation of northern Scotland ended around 85-86 AD after some hard fighting. The Roman military legion, the Second Auditrix, was permanently withdrawn from Britain. The Auditrix legion was one of the legions that invaded with Claudius. It was withdrawn. It was going to withdraw for good to be along the Danube frontier. With a reduction in the military presence in the province, the Romans slowly withdrew all the way south to where Hadrian's Wall is. And the Romans, in spite of having campaigns into Scotland at the time of the likes of Emperor Hadrian in the 120s, Antonius Pius in the 140s, and then Septimus Severus in the 210s, and there's another campaign we believe happened. The Caledonians were never ever truly defeated. But as many of you will know, I believe sincerely that the Romans did, in fact, could be said, did conquer Scotland, but they didn't conquer the minds and aspirations of the people. Let's give you an idea of what I'm talking about finally, right? What the Romans did in Scotland was what the Germans did in France after the French defeat in the Second World War. The Germans are said to have defeated the French, but there was the Vichy France. The Romans marched all the way south of Paris and said, right, the French can keep this bit, but you're a puppet state, right? So even though it's said in history that the Germans defeated the whole of France, there was an armistice. And German officers went down to Biarritz in the south and Marseille and all the rest of it. But still, the French army was still in the field after the defeat of France in 1940. Even though it's on every single map, most maps, that the Germans conquered the whole of France, militarily they didn't. And that's exactly the same as what happened in Scotland. The Romans defeated many tribes in Scotland. You could put the whole of Scotland on a map of the Roman Empire, but they never ever defeated the hearts and minds of the Scottish people, truly. And on that note, we'll call it a day. Right, are there any questions?
I've got two, Carl.
Go for it.
As we know, the Romans invaded countries and different areas of that country with the strict purpose of imposing their military might because they wanted to steal something from the locals, generally mineral wealth or agricultural wealth or whatever. So why would they actually go to that trouble of going to north of Scotland when certainly the agricultural wealth was very limited? I'm not sure what the mineral wealth was. That's question one. Why did they go there in the first place? And the second question is, the only way you could prove what Tacitus is saying about the battles up there is if any archaeological evidence has been found. So what evidence has been found of Roman occupation at all in the north of Scotland when these battles were supposed to have taken place?
Bill, there's not a sock in a shoe.
Say it again.
There's not a sock in a shoe. We've found nothing. There's no archaeological evidence at all.
Right. Okay. That says everything, doesn't it?
But all the archaeologists and historians talk about it. Let's just show you this a minute. I want to show you something, right? So just quickly here, there are a number of localities. People have been out there. There's this one here called Benash Hill, which is the one I'm talking about. You've got that range behind you, and you've got the trees in front of you. The Knock Hill as well. There you go. There's another one. this is like, you know, a nice hillock behind you. There would have been trees back there, and it Rhine dikes as well. There's marching camps near there, which we need a camp. We're going to need a military camp for these soldiers to come out from. No archaeological evidence, none at all.
Dear.
So in other words, Bill, do you know what I'd like to say, right? There's more archaeological evidence to say the Romans invaded Ireland than there is to say that there was a battle of Mons Grapius.
Yeah. So you shouldn't believe everything that our friend Tacitus has written about, should you?
This is why we look at archaeology.
Yeah, and it doesn't exist in that part of the world. But if people want to spend money trying to prove it, fine. One day they might find something to prove the Romans were there. But what about the reason why they went to Scotland in the first place, if they did?
Trees, status, train the Roman soldiers, or genuinely, there is another reason. And you know what I'm going to say that now. There was no resistance. Because now that may sound extreme, right? But I'm gonna say it as it is. When you're looking for evidence to say of a Roman conquest in Wales or Cornwall, is so sparsely populated, it's going to be very difficult to get an army together, right? And therefore you're going to basically, one fact, there's hardly any military presence in Cornwall, as you know, Bill. And most of the military presence in Wales is withdrawn by the 120s, only to leave a fort at Saguntium, occasionally a fort at Brecon, something going on at Getley Gaia, and then you've got the fort in Cardiff, right?
But
the military withdraws out of most of Wales because there's very little resistance. And the thing is, that's the thing, you might conquer Scotland, right? But you might not have any resistance. A bit like, you know, Julius Caesar, that second invasion of Julius Caesar, that Julius Caesar was drawn further and further into Britain because there was no bloody army. You know,
but isn't the construction of Hayden's Wall proof that they weren't interested in North of Scotland, which may prove that Tacitus was lying and there was no serious incursion into the north?
Well, actually, that might be the other thing. The other answer is, Bill, there was no need to send a military presence to Scotland because there was no resistance.
Yeah, so it's all a load of lies then, possibly.
Yeah, well, I like doing lies.
Yeah, there we are. I've said enough now.
By the way, Ireland next week. Roger.
Well, that's the best thing following on from Bill, in that they wouldn't have fought gone up to Scotland because there's not much there to be had, the way of minerals or wheat, corn for the troops when Europe. But of course, they have to watch. There was sort of potential insurrection. They might come down further into England and threaten what they had in Northern England and stuff. So you have to have a sort of barrier, almost. They had the walls, to stop this incursion that might be because these people could be carried, and they might just want to do taking back land which they reckon should be local, not Roman.
Right. Right, Roger. Basically, what we're talking about is the Jacobite rebellion, right? In 1746, there was no chance that the Jacobites were going to ever rebel again, right? But there was a massive military presence in Scotland to stop it happening. That could be what was happening back then. But there is a difference. There may have not have been much of a military resistance anyway. I tell you what, Bill.
No, there wasn't.
You sit down and get fit. Roger, you're cracking up a bit.
Yeah, it is. I know it needs.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Roger, I think the point is, right, is that you try and put 30,000 people into the field. Sherman marched to the sea in 1864 with just over 30,000 men, right? He had the supplies. He was fed by, you know, his army was fed in the field for the best part of a year, right? But the thing is, these Caledonians, 30,000 Caledonians, where are they going to get their food from? Who's going to look after their farms? Who's going to bring in the harvest, you know? This is one thing that Tacitus ain't telling us. He's telling us that suddenly there's all these men from somewhere fighting a battle, and they all happen to be men as well.
Yeah.
Anything else, Rog, before we finish on that? I'm going to ask Pat.
That's it. Oh, very good.
Thanks, Rog. Hopefully see you next week. What about you, Pat?
Oh, nothing. Good.
Right. Okay, Bill. Bill, you have the last word this week, and we'll call it a day.
My last word, Carl, is that next week I'm in West Wales for a break, okay? And I hope to find the bluestone quarries, amongst other things. And the following week, I've been roped into looking after my grandchildren on the Wednesday and the Thursday.
Oh.
So I won't see you for 2 weeks now, plus 3 weeks.
You.
Bill, can you sort of join in for half an hour whilst they're in the background pulling your legs?
Have you tried looking after a 5-year-old and a 8-year-old?
Yeah, they'll be okay for 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, exactly.
5 minutes is fine. But then, Grandad, you only said you were going to be an hour. Yeah, but I've only been 5 minutes.
True.
Yeah, but it's an hour. But that's been an hour gone, Grandad.
Well, I'd rather be with you. Bloody hard work to look after the little ones, as you know.
Well, yeah, tell me about it. Do you know? I got to be honest with you. In the National Museum of Wales today. Do you know what? Quickly before you go, right? Because I'm going to put this on the internet. I'm going to quickly see now if I can get this little bit of a video on you now. Hang on. Here we go. Allow this. If I can get this video on you, and you can actually see something. Hang on a minute. Let's just. Okay, we're gonna have. Let's just see what we can do. Right, okay. And put that there. It's closing all these bloody windows. Pat knows what I'm talking about. Right, so here we go. The thing is with the iPhone, if you click on the images, if you click on more than one image, it freezes out everything on my iPhone, right? So if I can just get the video on my computer quickly, and then you can see the it's a very small exhibition, but you can see this. Hang on. Okay. Right, here we go. Bingo. Move there. Oh, it's slowly moving on. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hang on. Move that there. Move there. Okay. Oh, it says it's going to take 30 seconds. So if you can all wait 30 seconds, we'll talk about... Right, so Bill, you're not going to join us next week. So Roger, you going to join us next week?
I should be. Gillian's down next week.
You should be where?
Gillian is down. Mrs.
Right, so we've got Pat and we've got Richard, and who else does these classes? Hang on a minute. Oh yeah, Bill, Pat, are you going to do tonight?
Yes.
Right, it's saying I got 40 seconds on you in a minute, so I'm just going to do. It's well worth a little look if you can't get into the music. Oh yeah, Dell's meant to join us, isn't he?
Well, I heard him today and he disappeared.
What, Dell was on?
I heard his voice.
You hear Dell's voice?
I did, yeah.
Did anyone else see? Bill, did you see Dell?
No, Roger mentioned he'd seen him.
I heard him.
Oh, that's a strange one. All right, then it's nearly downloaded. It's now saying it's 45 seconds. Come on, I've got all day. The moral of the story is, right, the iPhone has been very, very useful, right? You can with the iPhone I can do Zoom, I can do anything, but taking things off an iPhone is a nightmare. Have you got an iPhone, Pat?
Nope.
You got a Samsung, have you?
Yes.
What have you got, Rog?
I had an iPhone for once.
All right. What have you got, Bill? Have you got an iPhone or a Samsung, Bill?
Samsung Galaxy I've got.
Not a Samsung Galaxy Y. I used to have a Samsung Galaxy. It used to be great. I love Samsungs. They're brilliant.
7. Samson 7.
Samson 7. That's not that old, is it?
I've got a 28.
Oh, right. Well, yeah. Well, that's the state of the art, Bill. That's probably.
It's a new one. Yeah, it's a new one. Yeah.
Right, okay, it's 5 seconds now. Oh, it's on my computer, guys. Right, go. Let's sort of show you the exhibition quick. I know you want to see this. Right, so you probably won't get to the museum. Right, so right, how do I get you back on? Right, so there, share screen. Go for it and go.
Oh.
That's not Richard Burton.
No, this is the exhibition. So we were there from like 5 to 9 this morning, and I've done a video of this, and I'm reading out all this, and it was found in January. You've got all that there, and what they've done these little captions there, and literally, yeah, she's looking there at the dinosaur footprint, and then. And there's one there. Weirdly enough, right? Archaeology Company was going to cut this out the rock, but we would have missed the other dinosaur footprint that was really faint. It's there. You can see it. There's 2 in the rock. So I'm making this film, and we go along, right? And what I've got there is. This is the first, right? We're going to look at. Hang on, it's looking at. We're going to look at that. It's talking about crocodile.
Yeah.
And then you go. Hang on, Bill. Look at that there. My name there.
Oh, star. A star is born.
Exactly. What were you going to say, Bill?
Just to reiterate what you said about access to the museum, you've got to sort of make an appointment to see this one and the Richard Burton.
Yeah, this is all free, but yeah, you got to phone the museum. What is it, Michelle? Have you got to go online or something?
You go
Is it
online
parking?
and you book your place. It's free, but it's so they don't have too many people going in there in one go.
Yeah, go online, book your place. It's free. So you got to do that. And parking. Have you got a blue badge, Pat?
No.
Oh, bugger. Where was she parked, Michelle?
In the car park.
You can't look if you're gonna learn from us today, right? Obviously, we were Michelle and I were temporary staff today because we were part of the exhibition. But we parked in the museum private car park at the back. But if you go there. The doors open, I think, at 10. If you park up at say 9 o'clock, right? You can get a parking place at 9. Don't try and get a parking place at 10. You can park alongside the museum at 9 o'clock. It's closed on a Monday, but it's open every other day. It's well worth it, Pat.
Okay.
And I tell you what, Pat, you're looking hot today as well.
Up so low, in both ways in one area.
Hot.
So what I'm going to do now, if there's no more questions, Bill, Jessica will see you naturally tomorrow and tonight. Roger, you're saying I won't see you next week, so that's a shame.
Maybe Wednesday or Tuesday.
Okay. And I'll see you Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
And Pat, I will enjoy tonight and enjoy Jessica tomorrow. If there's no other questions, Roger, Bill, and Pat, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye then.
And Roger, stay on if you want to chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers, Pat.
So long.
And so long.
Mouse.
You off, Rog.
There we are.
See you, Rog. Oh, by the way, Rog, we might have a live Cardiff class starting soon.
Oh, and Blackwood again?
And I have warned Jessica, you dirty old man, not to.
Well, she ought to know. She ought to know.
Yeah, she ought to know. Yeah. So, yeah. I hope Chris don't turn up. You'll be hugging her all the time.
Oh.
Mind you, Chris used to hug me, so that was something else. On that note, Rog, anything else you want to ask me before we go?
Where might it be?
Where's your what?
Where would it be, the class?
We don't know yet. She's thinking about Pentrabane way, I think.
All right, yeah, okay.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah. Cheers, Carl.
Cheers, Rog. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.